Hello, guys. We are back for another episode of the Ukrainian logistics and pledges and potential supplies sustaining their force through the year 2024 and then for 2025. We are going to present a rather short vision of what Ukraine is going through. And then also I'm going to follow up to the first space. And today we're going to have a Q&A, of course. Most importantly is that the spark that I was looking for last space, which is heavy equipment given to the Ukrainians, finally happened. And you maybe already saw it, read about it, but the Spanish are going to pull 20 Leopard 2A4s from storage, refurbish them, and send them to Ukraine. Given the time frame it took last time, whereas the Leopards are in good or bad shape, it will depend on what kind of storage we're speaking about, but I'm counting on at least 4 months of preparation. So anything that could come from the Spaniards to replace what's going on with these tanks is not going to happen before end of July, beginning of August. And the biggest problem I have with this is that 20 Leopard tanks are obviously too low of a number. They would be replacing what the Ukrainians already have. So therefore, we cannot talk about any kind of expansion of the Ukrainian military, but rather a replenishment of the losses. What I said also on the last space, this tempo and this quantity given will only get more Ukrainian equipment destroyed. So even the planned replacement rate will not be enough to sustain the Ukrainian combat capabilities. Yesterday, I made a small post about a potential replacement number of Abrams tanks and M88 Hercules. Turns out that maybe that convoy was seen in Romania first, and those are 100% American tanks. So it could be a kind of build-up or a kind of insurance policy of the Americans around Eastern Poland. But so far, so it probably is a lot more kind of, I'd say, exercise force. The Romanian guy who actually filmed them was speaking about French tanks, but of course, once you recognize the M1A2 Abrams, especially given the specific shape, the tan color, the markings as well, because they are visible on the second video. There was a first video of them going through Prešov, and there it was not possible to see if there was these tanks were M1A1 or M1A2, and with so many M88 Hercules, given they corresponded more or less with the current known losses of the Ukrainian military when it comes to Abrams and ARVs and engineered vehicles made in the USA. Well, basically, it was logical to make the link, but apparently that's not the case. Those are due for the current exercise force buildup. So we could check also on that area as well. As I said, right now what's coming on for Ukraine is relatively crappy. We had Bulgarians BTR 60 PBs. We had the announcement by Belgium of Iveco LMVs. The Germans themselves said that they were going to send 180 armored vehicles and another 100 of IFVs. So on that aspect, the IFVs, for instance, we don't know which IFVs, infantry fighting vehicles, they're going to send, but probably they're going to be scrapped from either deep reserve of the German military, either bought from some eastern country or people with Eastern equipment. On that aspect, as I said, we had already discussed this. One source of replacement of equipment is India, and then we should check, especially for artillery, for the older Indians FH-77 and also other Soviet-style guns. FH-77 is not a Soviet-style gun; it's a 155 howitzer, but the point stands. Like, they can offer whatever they have in stock that they want to get rid of, although it would be unwise given their relative weakness towards the Chinese artillery corps. But it doesn't matter. At the end, um, it's for the Indians right now. It's, I think, an easy source of cash, even though they're pretending they're not sending them. I'm pretty sure that the pipeline through Jordan for their 155 millimeter extended range uh, rounds is government sanctioned, and their attempts to also strong arm Russia, better prices for their oil, is also a plan that are ploying through collaboration with the U.S. Treasury. So, on that aspect, once again, right now we don't have a good clarity of the artillery side of the deal. We know how many ammunition. So we know, for instance, that the initiative from the Czech Republic to obtain artillery rounds is pledged or funded to the tune of 1,161,000,000 euros, which is a little less than 78% of the goal, which was 1.5 billion euros for roughly 800,000 artillery rounds, 500,000 155 millimeters, and 300,000 122 millimeters. As I said already, the fact that we have such a huge percentage of 122 millimeter artillery rounds means that indeed the D30s, the Gvozdicas, are still very much in the game. And this because probably Ukrainians now are both getting guns from abroad. We saw the 3 Gvods from Bulgaria refitting some of their guns, but also accepting to fire these guns until they blow, basically. Um, the deal itself is extremely interesting, as I said, because it goes, in my opinion, well under the current price of the market, which means that so basically, if we analyze the deal, given the money we have, it looks that they're going to pay around 2,000 euros per 155 millimeters, and about 1,600 for 122 millimeters. The 1,600 euros for 122 is a rather good market price right now. If you are going to ask Arcom or even POF, you're gonna get around $2,000. So for new production, the logic seems to be correct. Europeans are paying 1.6, so it's going to be a mix of stock and existing existing ammunition and newly produced ammunition. This is also why apparently the deliveries are only going to start from July. But when it comes to the 155 millimeters, the price is extremely good. And it has to do probably because a lot of the ammunition is being assembled from almost everywhere, directed to a single focal point of contact, probably Turkey. And then, of course, it is being paid. So I think the existing stock is not going to be very, very qualitative, given that the Greeks are giving their M114A1 and rather large quantity for a country like Greece, 70 howitzers. It would make no sense to actually use anything else but shitty ammunition with that kind of howitzers, because they need the firepower. So therefore, my idea is that for about 300 pieces, these are scrapped almost everywhere, and they would cost around 1,200 euros a piece, so almost $1,400, and then 200,000 pieces, given the belated delivery time, and we don't know how much time it's going to take to have the full delivery. I think it is because part of those 500,000 pieces are contracted abroad. And those 200,000 pieces are contracted to a rather more conform market price at roughly 3,300 euros or 3,500 euros. And therefore, I think these have to come from either South Korea, other NATO standard producing countries. We have seen that they've been to Bosnia. We've seen they've also courted Vucic for Serbian rounds. So overall, what is making this transaction so interesting, but also so difficult, is I've said that in the group, that they are completely cleaning up the existing stock. I had the space very early over this to explain why the Europeans could not do that, so that they could not have delivered the Ukrainians on time for the 1 million rounds that were prepared and also prepaid as well. And first of all, it was because the cost was absolutely ridiculous. They pretended to be delivering 1 million rounds for 2,000 euros a piece. This turned out to be completely wrong because, as you see, the prices paid for European newly produced ammunition was between 3.8 and 4.7, up to 5.4 thousand euros. So there were, as I said, problems with the investment needed, the delivery time, the tempo, and also the cost itself. So basically, you budgeted for 2 billion euros and 1 million rounds. For those 2 billion euros, you would have like half of that. Let's be generous. And therefore, in order to cover, they had to spend more money. And on that aspect, I also discussed it on that space. I'm going to link it if you want to hear it. They would start drying what is out in the outside market that is actually available. Drying those stocks would mean that the people who are producing them for the next round, next batch of production, they will sell you spot prices. And spot prices in this case is going to be over 3,000 euros per piece for 155. Of course, it's going to cost cheaper because the labor cost for many of these countries, be that Bosnia, Serbia, and so on, is going to be lower. But the equipment used, quality of rounds that you are requiring, and also the cost of the raw materials, especially we spoke about nitrocellulose, we spoke about specific non-sensitive, insensitive fillers, and so on and so on. So this is a stopgap. It's going to help Ukraine when the round's going to be there. But the problem, as I said, are going to be, and Michael Kaufman said it, is the fact that the artillery assets now are missing for many reasons. I already explained. Use, wear and tear, Russian destruction, but also improper manipulation from the Ukrainians themselves. The Americans had this news piece where the Ukrainians were busy trying to repair shit, and it wouldn't work, mostly because the repairs were to just keep firing with the gun, not to preserve the gun itself. And basically, they were shooting everything to shit. Most importantly, as I said, some Russian sources have pointed out that the M198 is in theater. A couple of countries had it, except for besides America, so maybe those have given something. But the most, I'd say, problematic thing is that for a while we had a lot of M46 guns, 130 millimeter M46 guns, but now on both sides they've gone a wall. So the Russians, we know from the satellite survey that they have pulled about 60 guns out of storage, which looks to me pretty logical. It is to equip 5 firing units, and it would perfectly be doable with the production capability that they have, ammunition-wise and barrel-wise, of course. Those guns are good, but on the Ukrainian side, the Finns had given some, the Ukrainians had refurbished some, and I think the Romanians had given some and some ammunition. These have basically disappeared. And also, the most important part is that, as I said, whatever is going to be given, a lot of countries, I'm looking at Romania for the D20s, and Bulgaria for the D30s or Gvozdicas, they're gonna have to strip them fucking naked, because most of these guns were in deep storage and were largely amortized because, as you may already know, war-packed countries, ex-war-packed countries like Albania, for instance, we had a lot of equipment that was extremely redundant. Like artillery-wise, we had a lot for a small country. Bulgaria is just the same. Most of the war-packed countries had a fuck ton of material that, on a more normalized posture, were literally rotting into storage multiple base. So far, what we're seeing is little bit of hush hush artillery, mostly Soviet legacy pieces, some Western legacy pieces. We're speaking about Greece. The plan that we know of about 90 155 modern howitzers, sponsored by Denmark, France, and we're expecting the rest of them. Germany said that they were going to join this coalition of long-range artillery. Tank-wise, Germany has reiterated its will to have a Panzerfahrzeug artillery slash tank bullshit alliance again. But the issue is that when it comes to Germany, tanks and IFVs, the capability to spare numbers is very limited. And that, already, I explained, the Germans made very little Leopard 2 tanks. When it comes to the market, it was shared. So, for instance, the Americans may have made between 5 and 8,000 Abrams, for instance, but the major share of the stock is in America. They have the most active Abrams tanks, and they have also a fuck ton in storage. With Germany, the problem is completely different. The Leopard tank, once the Cold War stopped, was a export wonder. Let's call it like this. But Germany cannibalized its own stocks in order to sell. Other countries did the same. We had about 300 Leopard 2A4s that were spread around from the Netherlands and Germany towards Turkey, Chile, Greece, and so on. So instead of producing new tanks have been produced, by the way. I'm not saying that this didn't happen, but they were produced in very insufficient numbers and mostly for export. So the problem with Germany is that if they want to give tanks to Ukraine, they would have either to start a production line, an extra production line, or to rebuy these tanks from somewhere. And that was the whole point of the repurchase of the Type 87, Panzer 87 from Switzerland. But the Swiss are refusing to transfer them to a third party, in this case, Ukraine. So therefore, the whole ringtausch that's going to happen is that the Germans will be forced to rebuy the Swiss Leopard 2s from industry and affect it to its own army, while German army tanks will have to go to Ukraine. This was the whole situation, and therefore, as I said, Germany itself wants 100 tanks more than it has, but it also is forced to give to Ukraine. So therefore, the industrial tooling for Germany is extremely inconsequential with what they want to do. So basically, tanks for Germany are going to cost them a fuck ton for their own use. What can be retrospectively given to Ukraine is going to be rather, underwhelming. Leopard 2A6 or 2A5. And on the same time, Germany will have to honor contracts, one of them being the one that I said with Italy. So when it comes to purely helping Ukraine with vehicles, Germany is going to be forced to give mostly light vehicles, maps and stuff like that. Everything else, in my opinion, will have to come from other countries, but then you will have to pull a stock like what happened with the Leopard coalition, or then we will have to go straight to America, which then would probably, this is what I think is going to happen. Once the supplemental or the new tranche of aid, 60 billion something, is going to be voted in America, first thing that's going to happen is a batch of 100, 150, 200, 250 Abrams tanks is going to be rushed into Aniston, and a refurbishment process which could take up to 6 months minimum is going to take place, and therefore probably we're going to have the same bullshit we had last year with the Abrams. Most of them are going to be able to be transferred to the Ukrainians by September, October 2024. Once again, Ukrainians would have to now form units to use them. It's true that it's not like if they have surviving Leopard crews, they can retrain them pretty easily. If they don't, the training itself can be done, it's true, with a four-man platform like the M55Ss or Leopard platform and Leopard 1s. It's, of course, completely different in terms of inside ergonomics, but to train the crew with the teamwork that we need, tasks that you need, and so on and so on, those equipments can be very, very useful. On the other side, as I said, all of these delays indeed are showing us that things are going to go well into 2024 in the defensive posture. My problem with this is that on the same time, on the other side, the Russians are not standing still. We had Shoigu announce the creation of a fuck ton of units, but most importantly, he said we're going to have 14 divisions and at least 16 brigades. Okay, first of all, we like pause it to like 14 divisions, 16 brigades. Are those like within one in each other, or are those completely different? Like, if you make a proper analysis, if you got 14 divisions and 16 brigades, if you divide by 2 brigades per division, for instance, although it's not that simple, you're going to have 8 divisions out of the 14. Then you got maintenance battalions, auxiliary troops, and so on. But if we stop to the 14th division, that would require anywhere between 170 to almost 300,000 people, with the typical Russian division size. If you go with 18,000 people for a division, we're at roughly 250,000 people. 250,000 people equipped normally, we are looking at basically what the Russians lost so far, according to Oryx. This, for the moment, and I'm sorry to say, is not unattainable, but it's going to have to take a lot of time. And it will require an external help. External, I'm not saying buying abroad, I'm saying having the infrastructure, so machine tools and so on, to be able to start a localized production. Honestly, this would be the best way to solidify the China-Russia relationship. You buy lines of production, or you buy old stock like Type 86s that the Chinese have, which are basically BMP 1/2 chassis. You slap your Basurmanin turret or whatever you want to do there, and you send them. It is true that it's going to be very complicated to, in the long term, hide this, because you're going to see Chinese stock starting to miss on satellite, and also probably vehicles are going to get destroyed, and with the Ukrainians being close enough to start analyzing these pieces. We had this with the North Korean use of the Kim Skander, of course, the Iranian Shahids, and so on and so on and so on, ammunition rounds. So it's very difficult to hide these things. So, in my opinion, what would be more interesting is to have dual use chassis, engines, gearboxes, stuff like that, that you can quickly start slapping into Russian vehicles. Most importantly, there are Russian projects that could perfectly fit with this extra oomph army. We still don't know where the T-80 production line is. Only thing that we know is that there are new cuts that have been done in Omsk. We don't know where the BTR 20 or BTR 80 AUM is, and that project looked pretty nice. And while not groundbreaking, it corrected a lot of the issues that we can actually guess with the BTR 82A or AM. So all these things, when you go to what the Russians are announcing, literally saying, that's why I made the 100 Years War reference, that the Russians have had a lot of Azancours for 2 years and something now. But by 2025, if things go right, and this incremental increase of the Russian military happens, and I'm saying it doesn't even need to happen with the 250,000 people. They just need to have 120,000 people within new units with an 80,000 fighting force. And that would change the balance for the Ukrainian front a lot, because there's more equipment, etc., etc. But basically, for after 2 years and something of Azincourt, the Russians next year are going to have their first patés. Battle of Patay was basically, for the reference, the French cavalry that had been absolutely battered by the English long-range archery, basically the longbows, the whole fucking shitty myth about the longbows, was actually caught flat-footed in the battle. The problem is that it was a ruse, and they, instead of making these front charges, they cut out, opened up. The archers couldn't saturate the ranks that they did in Azincourt or before in the 14th century, and then the French converged in one fucking punch. I'd say like this: cut the British archers in the middle, then did another flanking attack, and then pursued the Brits until they killed every single archer. So pâté in French imagery, especially for people who have seen the 100 Years War, who have done studies about it, although the Brits don't like to admit it, for the French is a massive turning point, because it reestablished the cavalry predominance in the battlefield. In this case, for the Russians, it's just the same. Right now, mobility warfare, mobile warfare, maneuver warfare is extremely complicated because of the non-contact tools that Ukrainians have, and also the posture that the Russians have assumed, which is offensive posture. What is going to happen with next year, with a complete stretch out of the front and the Ukrainians not being able to just replace their losses if things don't change, of course, then cracks are going to muster. And I'm not saying they're going to make an attack in Kiev, going to make an attack in Chernihiv and so on. They're just going to fucking blast the line. The same way that they did in Avdiivka, when the line cracked because it was way too thin. Same is going to happen in 2025 if nothing changes, and if the Russians manage to have all their projects bear fruition. So basically, if the UMPB is properly integrated into at least the 3 fire platforms they want to have, which is Tornado S, Su-34s, but also Su-25s. So if all those 3 can happen, then you're going to have 3 levels of, I'd say, air support / tactical assets. Either you're going to drop them from very high with a power unit, so it's going to go at least 90 kilometers instead of the current 70 kilometers with the UMPKs, or you're going to use them with a Tornado S, and then you're going to see that should fly 150, 200 kilometers, or then very close support with a Su-25, go low, 500 meters maximum, pop them out with a engine going through, and then you are still completely off um, the close air defense limits from the Ukrainian side, which is dwindling as well. So if the Russians manage to establish what they want, their plan both on the ground and on the air, a lot of things are going to turn very sore for the Ukrainians if they don't change a couple of things, which is mobilization, if they don't get more equipment, if they don't get more artillery, and if they don't get more tanks. When it comes to the planes, it's always going to be limited because, as I said, planes have a huge footprint, and you cannot give to Ukraine whatever you want right now. You are constrained by the size of the plane you're going to give them, given that a lot of the hardened shelters that Ukrainians have is mostly limited for MiG-29s. And for the rest, there are too few places, and the Russians, of course, have eyes on most of the Ukrainian airfields. So this cat and mouse game is working right now because there are so few planes that Ukraine can use. But if you start popping out more planes, like you triple the number of planes that the Ukrainians can use, then they're more visible, and then you need to start avoiding Iskander strikes all over the territory. We had this in the beginning of the war. Many people mocked the Russians over this, but it was part of the PR. I'm not saying the Russians were extremely efficient or precise or whatever you want to call it, but the damage was real, and the damage is still real. If you see the losses, the first 3 weeks for the Ukrainian aviation, it reads like a fucking disaster. Now, where from? Where to go from here for Ukraine? I honestly, as I said, my biggest problem with Ukraine is that right now they haven't given up some of their most retarded ideas. We read that the plan for the Ukrainians to get money from the US is to repay them back by Russian assets, Russian spoils, basically. Um, the idea is to also ask for Russia to denuclearize. We are into a absolutely parallel universe when the Ukrainians right now are being extremely boorish and extremely cocky because they have this feeling that at the end what's going to happen is that they're not going to fail. They're too much of a symbol to fail for the West. In my opinion, it shows that they finally gave up the pretense of normalcy. The people in Ukraine right now are out of their mind. They're off their rocker. And one of the examples I want to give you is how they risked a lot of equipment to, start pushing the Russians and hurting the Russians, and it backfired extremely heavily. I want to speak about now what we now can guess about the extremely failed and bad decision of sending idiots from the 73rd Naval Operations Center in the Tenderovska Spit for an operation that, honestly, if you asked me back then, and I make a small analysis of that, I thought that these guys were LARPers. But it turned out that, in fact, it wasn't LARPing. These people had risked a lot, so basically HIMARS, Patriots, and other assets, and they were being hammered by Russian counter battery and Russian tactical strikes. Just check for yourself how many HIMARS strikes the last 2 weeks. How many Patriot interceptions the last 2 weeks? I think what happened is that at some point, the Russians, through many assets, I think that I had this joke with the group that there was probably a team analyzing burn patches all over the front line to see where from maybe the HIMARS launchers were operating from. And, if once you pack everything together, you got a fire band. A bit like the analysis I had done in 2022, 2023 about where to look for the HIMARS given your front line. So right now we know about two for sure because we saw them getting ventilated. But in my opinion, if we have to believe for at least 6 HIMARSes. So the two we have on tape, the two we have on thermal imaging, and at least two others that are in a forest. And you can barely make out what the Russians are attacking, but the Iskander striking on that shit is definitely real. And losing 6 at once, not 1, 2, or 4, but 6 at once, probably scared the shit out of the Ukrainian leadership and to the Americans as well, because suddenly for a year and a half, HIMARS was going unpunished, which I don't believe. I think that some close encounters have happened. Jihadi Julian was so kind to provide us at least an evidence of 2 German Mars being pulled back to Germany for repairs. But suddenly, if those strikes are concomitant, so you have within 2 weeks 6 of your HIMARS going bust, you're scared as fuck. And the last strike was visible against Avdiivka. There was one ground-launched small diameter bomb hit on the main hall of the coke plant, and then another HIMARS strike just next to a cornet position that was also at the coke plant. And then AS 250. I'm going to post the video if you want. Since then, there is nothing. Probably because those retards that tried that stuff with the HIMARS firing towards Avdiivka are those who got pounced. So suddenly you have all this shit going completely haywire. You cannot use your HIMARS because you don't know what happened. And then the Russians start to hit your assets around the Odessa coast. And you have to do something. You don't have a equivalent to the Lancet because you're stupid and you think it was trash from the beginning, but now you're starting to make your own shitty copy. And that stuff is not super powerful. The Lancet itself does just the job it is supposed to be doing, which is a detail taking out of a series of assets, but you're not going to hit a large ship with that. You're going to hit small patrol boats, small cutters, artillery boats that they hit. And then these Lancets are also going to start to take out your aviation on the ground if you have nothing to defend against. And this is what the Russians had been doing not far from the Tenderovska Spit for at least 3-4 weeks. So all the footage that you're seeing right now, be that the L-39, the boats getting hit on the Dnieper, some radars along the Odessa coast, all of this probably were happening a couple of weeks before those idiots went to the Kherson area. And this madness, sending guys to hunt on foot in enemy territory, Zara teams, this is textbook Budanov. That asshole, that retard, as I said, he doesn't care about winning anymore now. Because I think he knows he has lost. He's just caring about blowing shit up and showing results, quote unquote. But this is the biggest problem with Ukraine right now. They are so limited by this factor of trying to score fucking PR points that it's almost impossible for them to actually understand what it takes. Same thing for the Reds in Belgorod. The same idea. You are losing extremely precious assets. Like there are 7-8 tanks off, 6 engineering equipment and stuff like that. Artillery multiple rocket launchers, and all this just to enter 200 to 400 meters within Russian territory and do this bullshit operator stuff. And I understand that for a lot of people, it's not an insult, an affront. It's good PR if you are a diehard Ukrainian supporter, because you are bringing the war to Russia, you are hitting Belgorod, you are killing civilians in Belgorod. That's nice. That's payback. Of course, I don't think it's nice. I'm just paraphrasing these idiots. But the problem is that this is hurting also your logistics. I'm not saying that losing 10 tanks trying to attack Belgorod is the end of the world, but it's 10 tanks that you usually lose um, in 10-15 days. The ratio for the Ukrainian losses so far in the war has been about 7 to 8 tanks a week. You're losing those in a couple of days and in a very small, limited front. Those things are not coming back. It's not that you lose them at Terni and then you can pull them out. No, you are losing them in almost Russian territory. So what's going to happen with those tanks? That this is exactly what happened the last time. They're just going to blow them up. So if you're going to take back your hulks, no problem. Also, something very important, you are attacking into an area where, of course, you can do a lot of PR, but at the end, the advancement, I mean, you are 200 to 400, 600 meters if you want, within Russian territory. And not only are you not advancing, but you're getting your guys killed. I posted this morning 7 idiots from a Gur outfit, so the Artan outfit, who died in Kozinka, and apparently they died within 2 hours of combat. Then you got the Romanian hobos that went to attack with Western equipment, who lost two shitty BATT UGM, sorry, and at least 7 of those guys are on tape dead. So all these losses, I firmly understand that for a lot of people, they don't see the Ukrainian losses; they see only these Russian volunteers or foreign volunteers. So it doesn't matter. It's not Ukrainians that are dying; are trashy adventurers from Europe or scoundrels from Russia. So they still deserve to die. So for the Ukrainians, the cost is humanly limited. But then when you start adding these special figures, then you start understanding where are we fucking going with this, and where is the insistence? Because this time it has been a whole week plus. Last time, yes, they tried in March. Last 4 days, there was good PR, and then they were pushed back, and it was done. Then they came back in May. In May was even worse, and in May was to spoil, of course, the 9th of May celebrations. But it had a limit. You had a couple of losses, but now it's going on. I mean, at some point, you're gonna understand you cannot make a crinky out of everything. And for the Russians, yes, they're gonna be maybe a small bleeding wound up to some point, but it also means that for Russia, they are in Belgorod. You from Kharkov have a longer way to go, and also the Russians can start hitting your ass deeper than that. As I said, if you want to exchange damages with Russia on the border area, you're gonna start losing 100 civilians per fucking week, if not per day. If you want to go to this extermination fight at the border, Ukrainians are in a way worse position, because they're gonna be forced to use equipment that is needed elsewhere in the moment where they don't have all what they need. So on the logistical side of the show, things are coming. Ukraine is looking to be geared for a longer term battle, but the rest is not following, and some mistakes that have been made for the moment are absolutely retarded. Also, this needs to change. Some units in the Ukrainian military, so in this case GUR, they are given way too much power due to very little results. So a lot of people are going to say, yeah, they sunk boats. Fucking wow, it's true. There are real losses, no problem. I'm completely agreeing with you. But on the other side, you lost Avdivka. You're losing the first line. People are completely have cleared Tonenke, and they're gonna take Semenivka in fucking pincer. Once Semenivka falls, then they're gonna push up for Ceretino by the south. And of course, you can say, yeah, but the Russians are losing so many people. It doesn't matter. I'm gonna repeat what I said. It's the Sisyphus paradigm. Russians can lose a lot of people. But if they're advancing the chains, you'll have to take that ground back. And what happens when you're trying to take that ground back? The roles are reversed. And whatever you've saved through this shitty defense, you're going to start losing it. But this time, as I said, it doesn't matter the ground you're going to take back if you start losing a lot more equipment. We had this logic with Bahmut. We have this logic with the counter. Biggest problem from Ukraine right now is the very essence of this fight. They are a smaller country, smaller manpool, and of course they're gonna get less equipment to equip because the army is gonna be smaller. So logistically, the thing that the Ukrainians would need right now, we can speak about robotic systems and so on, or high complexity, high precision, extremely deadly weapons. No problem. We can think of a lot of stuff. But the real problem for Ukraine is how to palliate every single loss. If Ukrainians start getting KIA numbers that they had during the counter, these are completely fucking up your Orbat, but also you cannot replace them as fast as you could, let's say in 2022, where basically you grab people and said you need to defend Ukraine, get this AK-74 and go to the fucking trench and die, of course. Now your problem is that it's fine, you're gonna have FPV operators, like 2,000, 3,000 of them, and they're gonna inflict damage, but then suddenly you got a fucking UMPK 500 just getting to the okop, killing 20 of your guys. And it doesn't matter if the guy is a FPV operator or artillery servant, those guys are gone. And then you lose assets as well. But the most important problem right now is that the Russians can hit whenever they want. Of course, it's a grind match on both sides. But realistically, Ukraine should have whatever it needs to at least reverse some positions on the front line by September, so they can try this Kharkov Light or Kharkov Beast, whatever, on the front line at the place of their choosing, very quick, very fast, in order to at least impress this, I'd say, reversal on the Russian psyche. A bit like what happened with Kharkov. The loss of all those positions in the Kharkov Oblast literally marked the Russians, and everybody was dooming. And suddenly, Russians themselves were seeing that, oh shit, maybe this war is not going where we want. Of course, the war was already not going where they wanted, but there you had a reversal of fortune of gigantic proportions. Therefore, in this aspect, whatever is happening right now with the Ukrainian logistics is very slow. It's not on time. Maybe it's better than the first time. They're gonna take their time, build up, train the troops, whatever you want. But we're not seeing mobilization on the Ukrainian side. We're not seeing the money coming to them, although they're gonna receive about 4.5 billion euros end of this week or next week. And the most problematic shit that we have is not all this. No, the most problematic shit that we have right now is that the Ukrainian side is also not telling the truth. There is always exaggeration. So for us, as open source um, observers, let's say it like this. I'm not gonna give us the term of analysts, but as observers, we also don't know what to fucking do with these people. Because today they said they intercepted 31 fucking missiles over Kiev, and then like the very next moment they posted a huge crater strike which ravaged like 4 or 5 storage areas around itself. How can you even try to analyze this shit? And of course, it would be nice for the Russians to have something over watching these strikes, so we know what was hit. Because right now, what happens also with the Russian side, we have these DGs that hint at stuff, and it makes extremely complicated for everyone to say, okay, this is the strike. For Ukrainians, the Russians have no problem filming whatever. Like, oh, let's film for half an hour a refinery burning, or let's film over the Engels airbase, the interceptions. With Ukrainians, you don't have them. Even the images that we have today with Kiev, holy shit, man! Like, yeah, something was burned, but everything is under control when it comes to BDA on the Ukrainian side. So I firmly understand the problem for Ukrainians. They cannot show everything, or they have to politicize most of what they're showing. So we had the case with the Odessa strike that we know killed a lot of the loot company, but they passed it as civilians dying. It was very pathetic. Say for Kiev now, we will never know exactly what was hit. The Russians can say whatever they want as well. Nobody's going to believe them, even though we're gonna have hints and things going on and on and on. And as I said, have been so many strikes from the Russian military, and there are some results in the resilience of Ukrainian armed forces that we have to ask ourselves. Oh wait, maybe these Russian strikes are working somehow. But this is the problem with Ukraine right now. We cannot trust what they say. They are good at hiding shit, and we can only deduct. This is what I just did with the Tedorowski Speed Party. We can only deduct after fact, but it's like 3 weeks after it happened, and now we have the Russians posting shit. So the analysis of this war right now is at the point where um, logistically, Ukraine doesn't seem to have any kind of bleep up. Okay, there are a lot of pledges. The quality of and type of things that are being pledged to Ukraine doesn't lead us to believe that anything's going to happen this year, anything serious. It could be, of course, completely changing. As I said, once the American package is passed, and honestly, I don't know how much it can last. Like maybe April, maybe May, and that would be a great. Honestly, would be the most perfect case for Russia having 2 more months, uh, knowingly that whatever is going to be given to Ukraine is not going to be enough. The most important part here that I'm having is most important problem that I'm having is that I don't really understand why. Like, of course, we had these jokes last year about GDP and all this stuff, and I understand also. I told you first and foremost that the Europeans and the Americans right now need to have a proper incentive to um, scale up critical and crucial industries. So Germans, if they want to build a 3-4 lines of assembly for Leopards, they need to have the cash for it as well. So they need 20 fucking billion euros just to be able to produce them. And the money earmarked for this is already allocated. Like if you saw the latest article over this, 50 billion euros out of the 100 billion are going to be only for the personnel. So refurbishing barracks, optimizing living conditions, optimizing the payment for the soldiers, and also keeping them on. This was one of the problems with the European military, and American as well, but with the European military, it's just not possible to make a living out of a military career. Not that it doesn't pay, but it doesn't pay as a man. You're gonna fucking be a soldier, but from most of the experience, even myself, it's not compatible with the kind of living together or family fostering that we have now in 21st century. So the biggest problem overall is that something needs to happen for Ukraine to both benefit from a renewed European military industrial complex interest, although the Germans are promising shit like we're gonna build a propellant slash powder factory in Romania, we're gonna build another in Lithuania, this and that. All this is not a problem because this will have to come from the pockets of the German state, and the European initiative for ammunition is literally laughable. They are just giving 500 million. They gave 500 million euros to multiple states so they can, upgrade their facilities and basically have a better rolling stock. It's not what is needed. This is literally a stopgap measure, in my opinion, to see what's going to come. The readaptation of the European industry, at least the American is something else. I'm not going to deal with that. But the adaptation of the European industry is also due to the fact that most of the European industries right now are working on a principle of offsets. So basically, imposed by Korean, they want a technical offset, so transfer of technology, whatever you call it. The Romanians just gave the Turks a 1,000 autocar Cobra contract. They want an offset as well. This takes more time than the production because you need to build facilities, you need to transfer, train people. Of course, that gives Romania the capability to build their own at some point, benefit from the know-how, from the tooling and so on. But it would take a lot more time than if the Turks were to produce everything, drop it to you, and then you can give them to wherever you want. And of course, it's called strategic investment, but the costs for countries like Romania or for countries like Bulgaria or smaller countries when it comes to a sort of remilitarization of their budgets, it makes no sense. You can perfectly understand that for the US because they are masters of their own destiny when it comes to the dollar. They can print as much as they want. It's not going to matter at the end. Same for China. Big boy league. Russia is even different because the Russians are trying to have a. Honestly, if you guys can fathom this, the Russians are trying to stay on a 2 to 4% GDP deficit and have a fucking war, like the largest conflict in Europe. On the other side, you got the Ukrainians literally spending over 100% of their fucking GDP just to fight, stay in the fight, and have 102% deficit. So basically, they are spending like 80 something billion, which is probably what the real GDP of the Ukrainian state is right now. And the budget deficit is 44 billion dollars, whereas their taxation base can provide them with, and this is hilarious because I don't believe it, but about 42 billion dollars of revenue. And then, as I said, you have multiple others, like France. The deficit this is going to be funny. If they are under 3% GDP, I would like have fun. Like all this shit is going to a sense that sees all those who are helping Ukraine right now. Well, they will have to coalesce. They will have to coalesce, and indeed, that's the troublesome point, because most of them are going at some point to understand that the only way to defeat Russia is to attack Russia as a group. So basically, a kind of coalition of willing with unpredictable results. I'm not saying that Russia's are going to nuke everybody, but that's the first thing you're gonna think. Like, how are the Russians gonna let you do anything while they can perfectly nuke Ukraine? You guys in Ukraine, it wouldn't matter. You are currently waging a war against them, so they're not gonna nuke France. They're gonna nuke Germany, but they're gonna nuke Ukraine with you inside. Done. So all this scenario, all this problem with the Ukraine logistics are fucked up. Are really fucked up. I have a huge problem with that. Just a second, guys. Yeah, just got a delivery at the office. So basically, the biggest problem I have right now. So, well, nothing is changing. The Ukrainians are not doing anything special, and the biggest trouble with this absence um, is the following: we are going more and more and more to a term where, let's say that Trump wins or Biden is reelected. On the European side, nothing much is going to change, even though there are the European elections 9th of June for the parliament, of course. Nothing's going to change fundamentally. So it's not going to be a nice victory or a beautiful victory for the Russians. But if things do not change, and they don't seem to change um, drastically, rapidly, maybe it's going to be more gradual, and then they're going to go back to this absolutely slugging match when slowly the Europeans are going to start putting their own troops in a way or another. Nothing, nothing clicks. Nothing is logical. I'd say nothing says we're doing this. Even the attacks that were announced with fanfare. Now Biden says we are not ready to announce it. And I know why they're not ready to announce it. Because the Atacams are going to be used for something extremely different than what they were used initially. Initially, they tried to take out the helicopter force of the Russian army. They did some damage, that's sure, but the problem is that the Russians pulled back, replaced everything. And we have strikes by helicopters still there. And then the Russians added something else, UMPKs. They drowned Avdiivka and UMPKs. They drowned that line UMPKs. They are drowning everything that needs to be drowned if they need to put the pressure. Patriot attempts were made, resulted in maybe two Su-35Ss downed, and then Patriots were gone. Right now, every single move that Americans are doing is not enough. It's too small. It's too limited. And of course, the HIMARS thing was they had a nice run with that. I'm not going to lie to you. But where the HIMARS failed was exactly during the counter when it was a full bonanza for them to use them tactically. but the effects that it had on the Russian logistics and the Russian fighting force were extremely limited compared to the same effects they had in Kharkov or in Kherson early on. So again, there needs to be something for the Ukrainian armed forces from the West logistically that would have to upend all of this. And it would mean, once again, I said, at least 1,000 howitzers, at least 3 to 4 million ammunition rounds, um, 25,000 HIMARS rockets, longer range rockets, larger payload rockets. Um, and the FPVs are the sign of this impotence on the Ukrainian side. It's for sure they are doing damage, but they are doing this damage with the posture that the Russians have right now. That damage, as I said, will be extremely reversed if the Ukrainians would have to do the same. And it's extremely funny and easy how this thing works. It's literally the Russians are going to push us at maximum up to a certain point. Ukrainians will have to counterattack because otherwise the line is going to break down. These counterattacks going to produce a lot of Ukrainian losses, and then it's going to stop somewhere in the middle of maximum Russian advance, maximum Ukrainian counteroffensive, which means that it's going to be positive for the Russian Toli in controlled territory. Just look at what happened in Zapo and what happened in Bahmut. And this grinding game is just going to give finally what I said early on, that one side is going to be completely exhausted. The other is not going to be much better. It just would have more in the tank. But the troops that both sides going to put at the front line at any given time are going to face the same bullshit. Just on one side you got a huge Ural truck, and on the other a small Zhiguli, and the Zhiguli is going to, stop at some point running. And either you give them, I don't know, a Ford F-150 truck, or doesn't matter, but at some point you will have to palliate for Ukrainian deficiencies. And of course, this is where Macron came with his bullshit about freeing troops from rear areas, all that stuff. But as I said, if you start freeing troops from rear areas, it means that you will have to carry on with the border guard activities, which means that you're going to be a target, a legitimate one. So let's not forget the other problem for the Europeans here. Most of the chancelleries do not want to intervene. The Italians said it openly. Germans, of course, they're going to say it openly. Macron might say a lot of shit, and then the COC of the French army can say bullshit like we can put a division, 20,000 people within 30 days, a month, but they have huge troubles deploying 5,000 troops in Romania right now. And also, as I said, the funny part is the French have this tendency of talking too much. I know that because, well, I live there part of the year. So, generally, the uptick when it comes to how the Ukrainians are going to manage right now would depend largely on how the Russians are going to manage with destroying Ukrainian assets. And the last 2 weeks have been an absolute nightmare. I mean, we are counting the barrel losses, and even if it's temporary loss, we are getting to what the Ukrainians are pretending they killed from the Russian side. And all of this has to do not only with the lack of ammunition, but I said it's just because they lost a lot of their more long-range pieces. They pulled them back, like the archers. 2 archers were attacked, 2 out of 8, and then suddenly, oh wait, we're not gonna align them. it's systematic. The Ukrainians are doing this systematically because they know that those assets are not easily replaceable. And this is the crux of the matter. So now they're lining up shit like L-119, GVODs, D-20s, D-30s, some MST-S, some MST-Bs, and the replacements they're getting are half-assed as well. The Greek piece is going to be fine. The Greek pieces are going to go hand in hand and going to eat ammunition to shoot at 15, 20 kilometers max, let's say 17 to be nice to everybody, while they get ammunition to be able to fire at 40 kilometers. If those 70 guns are lined up, for instance, and they're given a proper complement, so let's say 500 rounds per week, well, you're eating up a rather sizable ammunition stock for what? 35,000 rounds that you're not going to be able to fire more than 70 kilometers. That too is logistics. So what do you use these guns for? Notably defense. They're heavier, you need different type of transport and so on. And also you cannot hide them easily because they're like chunkers. So once again, we go back to what happened last year when the Orbat was shit for the offense. Now you have a shit Orbat for artillery as well. And as I said, this is better explained by what this Czech initiative for ammunition is, which is 40%, 35% of the stock has to be 122, which limits its range, given what is being produced as 122 right now, to maximum 20 kilometers, maximum. While in the same time, the Russians now are firing base bleed 122 over 26 kilometers. I think you understand where this is going. Like the Ukrainians are completely reshaped with NATO equipment, and I said this previously at the same space. I said what the woes of the Western military-industrial complex are. So either Ukrainians are shaped as a NATO army fully, so all these loose ties are noted and they are addressed, or then, I'm gonna repeat it, or then you have to fight that war yourself. And then there's third option, which is talk to the Russians and give them as much as you can. As much as you can afford, of course. And this is the biggest problem right now. You have put your face to this war. You have said a lot of shit that you cannot take back. I'm not speaking about the Ukrainian delirium. I'm speaking about what Lloyd Austin said. We are not going to let Ukraine lose. Sorry, buddy. Fortunately, it's not up to you to decide. So, in my opinion, and this is the second part, I'm going to follow up on this. Right now, I don't see anything, any pledge within the 2 to 3 months that would change anything for the Ukrainian military. Unless we see MRAPs, unless we see tanks, unless we see IVs in mid triple digits, like 500 Bradleys, 300 Marders, 400-500 tanks again of one make, not 10 Arietes, 50 Leopards, 100 Abrams. 10 challengers. No. It has to be streamlined. It has to be logistically viable. It has to be a lot more than what they're giving right now. Nothing so far makes any sense. We continue in this existential war, in this trying to survive. But majorly, and this is my biggest problem, majorly there is nothing there to justify any claim from the Ukrainian side. Like, there is nothing that is being amassed that would change a lot. One of the things I said is that no T-64s have been added. The few of them that are being refurbished and prepared for combat are lost in stupid adventures in Belgorod. Some artillery is being found, some artillery is being funded, but still we are looking at maybe 300 barrels of scraps from any kind of origin. 300 barrels that are not 155 millimeter in total means that half of those, and even 155 with the Greek M114, you have the range of a D20, even worse, or a D30. This would mean that those guns cannot be used in offensive operations. They make sense in defensive ones, no problem, but in offensive operations, you forget about them. And also, as I said, this is gonna eat up range-wise, capacity-wise, and ammunition-wise. You are laughing, but as I said, if those M114s get those 35,000 rounds per week to fire, we are looking at over 5%, almost 7%, 7.5% of the stock that is supposedly deliverable by the Czech initiative. And this is a week. They're not maybe going to fire all of it, but this is supposed to be the complement for these guns. And it's not even much. It's like 70 rounds a day per 7 fire missions a day per gun. So defensively it's going to make sense, but you are depriving yourself of ammunition that you could use for better guns. So sometimes beggars cannot be choosers, but the thematic of last year of giving junk because you don't have anything else or you don't want to deliver anything else is continuing with the Ukrainian armed forces. And as I said, logistically, thus far, nothing has changed. The Russians maybe are not like absolutely guaranteed to win this war the way they want it, but for as long as this is going to keep going, the biggest problem we're going to have is justifying, on the Ukrainian side, justifying the dead. I know that a lot of people say, yeah, they're fighting for the territory, for the country, for their freedom, whatever you know. And I'm like, yeah, fine. Those are just rhetorical points. But what with are you justifying losing a brigade per month? KIA, not the rest, as minimum. What are you repelling the Russians? Are you advancing 30, 50 kilometers a day? Is this Kharkov 2022? No, it's not. And right now, what you're doing is building obstacles to stop probably an offensive that the Russians will never do. The Russians don't even need to make those offensives in Zaporozhye. They should, and well, they will have to do at some point, but they don't need it. For as long as you're insisting of plugging the same gap with bodies, they don't need to get further. They're just gonna fucking hit a band, as I said, 20, 30 kilometers beyond the front line. When you concentrate your troops and your equipment and ammunition, and it's done. You're gonna get ground the same way that the Russians get ground when they go to the assault by FPVs. You get ground on the rear by UMPKs. It's just a difference of scale. And this is why I told you guys in October that that's how it's going to go. It's just fixating, but on a different scale. When the Ukrainians are fixating the Russians 2 to 5 kilometers from their lines, the Russians are fixating the Ukrainians 10 to 30 kilometers from their lines. And initially it was a meme. The UMPKs were a meme. We were speaking about 12, 24 a day. It was like, wow. But now we're seeing that it's a fucking nightmare. Because you're guaranteed to get them. You're not shooting Su-34s. And the Russians haven't even started to drop them by Su-24s, which would, as I said, at least quintuple the assets, so the bombs falling on your head. What is limiting the Ukrainian pain right now is literally the Russians planning with the UMPK kits. I would love to see a March built UMPK kit and see how many, because as you have seen, the Russians have this funny thing of communicating with with the Ukrainians by putting basically the planned output, and of course it completely clicks with the stencils on the bombs. So I think that at least 1,200 are going to be produced in March as well, which means that more bombs are being dropped. But as I said, we have 12,000 UMPKs. Even if 50% of those are on target, and the average weight of explosive is 300, like, guys, it's a fucking nightmare for the other side. So on that aspect, logistically, the Ukrainians right now, I think their biggest issue is something needs to happen shorten the war, even tactically. So basically, some fucking peace negotiation or Russian cockiness to allowing them, like what Macron yobbed about. I'm going to offer the Russians a ceasefire during the Olympic Games. And I was like, are you retarded? It's going to be in the middle of the summer. Probably the best period for both sides to duke at it. It's like historically, late spring, summer has been battlefield 101, especially in that area. So what the fuck are you even talking about? So yeah, guys, that's what I have to say for the second part of the quote unquote logistical watch on the Ukrainian side. So far, nothing has changed. Couple of numbers. Quality wise, of course, a lot of things might be unannounced, and therefore, as I said, we have to be extremely careful with what we say. But so far, there is nothing there. And the sparking the plug that I said, are just these 20 Spanish Leopards that probably are going to come later on. Everything for Ukraine, for at least to have a better vision on what is going to happen to them this year and next year, is going to depend from the US supplemental, the US financing, and what that US financing is going to be able to unleash. Which means that probably we're going to see, once the financing passes, a doubling of the US equipment. So, like 400 Bradleys, 300 Strikers, and probably at least a ABCT worth of Abrams tanks. Which, this is going to be a slight note, Honestly, I don't know what the fuck they were thinking, but they've sent literally the worst trash the American army had in Ukraine. They do not have anti-vehicular communication system. They do not have multifunctional displays. Um, as I said, there is no slave channel for using the thermal or night objective device on the M2 machine gun on the skate rig. The gunner does not have a external ballistic computer which would allow him to follow up shots. So everything is done manually. It's not different from their T-64 BVs over 17s. Literally nothing is different there. Um, I do not understand what the plan was. And as I said, given what we have right now as Abrams tanks available in Avdiivka, we have the tank 101, with that we know was from the 25th Assault Battalion that got fucked. We had the 105 that we saw the Russians jump in and had that internal visit. Tank was still in quite good condition. We had the 202 that was seen abandoned or stopped on the side of the road. We had the 204, which was the first tank that was shown in the area with the first Arat tiles. And then we have two other tanks that we know have been lost. So 101, 105, we know have been lost because we have documents and we have presence from the Russians. And then it should be at least two other tanks, probably from the first platoon. But as I made the analysis initially, these guys sent HQ plus one platoon, and 105 is basically first battalion HQ 05. So basically, it's the first company of the first platoon of the first company of first battalion. And then we have the 202, and that's the second company, obviously, because there's only one battalion with 31 tanks. You cannot have a division, so, or a brigade. So basically, this is the funny thing. They used their best trained tankers on a defensive position and have lost 4, probably 5, because we have also a Lancet hit on another. So this is how useless so far American help has been shown to be. Comparatively, the Leopard right now, I maybe owe them an apology, not as much because they have been so influential into the Ukrainian capabilities on the field, but at least they haven't been taken out so easily. Initially, it's true, they masked this assault, so they had a whole fucking welcoming party with helicopters and drones and shit. But the Abrams literally was hit like it literally was the Iraqi insurgency back in 2014-15. Some dudes with a cornet and pop, pop goes the Abrams. Of course, then you had the FPVs, RPGs, mines, and all that stuff. But once again, like, that tank hasn't shown any of the qualities it supposedly needs to have, because, oh my god, best tank in the world. And yes, of course, it has a lot to do with how Ukrainians are using them and the ecosystem of that tank as well. It doesn't have complete control of the airspace. It doesn't have a boxed enemy that they can fucking ring from 2-3 kilometers or even more. Yes, this is why, as I said from the beginning, taking ODS, taking OEF as a description or expectative for these weapons in Ukraine is wrong. You are not facing the Iraqis. You are not facing the Yemenis, although the Yemenis have already completely humiliated the idea of the M1 Abrams. But This war is for real, guys. So yeah, I don't understand why the Americans were doing this. I now understand why the Americans waited so long to allow the Ukrainians to use the tank, because they knew they had given them lemons. But if America doesn't change its quality of delivery, so basically more tanks, better trained crew, and also using them or forcing Ukrainians to use them as a whole ecosystem, like the reproach that has been done to the Russians for so long. So basically exposing a maximum of equipment to FPVs, ATGMs, helicopters and shit, then they're not going to go anywhere. They're just going to start dripping losses 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, 15, 20. And then we're going to be in the same exact situation where we are right now, where only 30% of Leopard tanks are useful. And most of the Abrams tanks are not being used because using them en masse means mass casualties. And using them one by one allows them to stop the small attacks that the Russians are doing for some bum fuck village in Donbass. And that's it. So once again, the problem with the Ukrainians right now, or rather the problem with the Ukrainian help right now, is that even in quality is nowhere where it should be. Some help is tremendous, like the ISR, coordination for strikes, long range assets. Scalps and Storm Shadows are fucking dangerous. Nobody's discussing that. That was a real oomph. Everything else, maybe the HIMARS. But all those work because the ISR is on point, because the assets for that ISR are completely different. That help is very important, and that help needs to stop for the Russians to be able to completely overrun the Ukrainians. And that help is not going to stop because it's the cheapest for the Americans. They can just give positions, they can make a whole planning for themselves, and then Ukrainians just need to learn. It costs money because it's a huge infrastructure, satellites, and real-time processing data and all that shit. But it's very cheap because it's completely concealed. You only can deduct it after it does the damage. And everything else, you're just gonna fucking think about it. What's gonna happen? So yeah, guys, that was it. If you have questions, please come forward. Sorry for the last time, but I had another appointment. So yeah, up to you guys. If you want to contribute, I'm listening. Okay, well, apparently nobody's interested into adding anything. It was more or less to give you a heads up over what's going on. We will see at the end of this week and probably next week. Don't forget that for a lot of people it's going to be Easter, and mostly for a couple of institutions, stuff is going to get blocked, especially in the US. They have vacay. So any kind of change in plan, vote, and all that stuff is most likely to happen in the second week of April, which means a lot of funny things to happen for the Ukrainians meanwhile, and deliveries are going to be as usual on smallish quantities, including the Germans. I said that had delivered 18,000 rounds last month or this month to the Ukrainian armed forces, 18,155 millimeter rounds. Thank you for everything, guys. We will probably see each other as a follow-up for these logistical, I'd say, observation. If anything changes, we will notice immediately because everybody's going to start contributing. They're going to start pledging armor and artillery. the most pressing matter for the Ukrainians is to find a way to not throw away air defenses, because a lot of things has been told about the Russian air defense inability to shoot down Ukrainian drones. But after what happened in Yaroslav, refinery attacks, at least yesterday and today, have stopped. Meanwhile, the Ukrainians were forced to defend from a rather sizable Russian attack with cruise missiles and ballistic missiles in Kiev and elsewhere, probably. So don't forget, the biggest problem for Ukrainians right now is to spare AD assets. And I think there is where we need to start digging a little bit. And on that aspect, the only possibility for the Ukrainians would be to reverse engineer or restart a localized production of the S300, which unfortunately for them is impossible because over 60% of the components were coming from Russia. And as for the rest, I can still find stocks of legacy systems like Strelas, like OSAs, even Tor, but they will have to have Western Air Systems as SAP, which is going to eat, I think, a lot of the Western help in money parlance. Thank you very much, guys. Have a nice day. See you next time. Bye bye.